Bastila's breath came shallow, measured, and too thin for how vast her mind had become. The chamber smelled of old stone and warmed metal. Incense burned down to bitter ash in a bronze bowl that had outlived a dozen chancellors and more wars than the Republic liked to count. In the dark, a holomap hovered like a frozen storm, blue lines for hyperspace corridors, red pinpricks for contested systems, a slow pulse where fleets slid past one another in silence. Hunters that could not stop hunting because the galaxy had forgotten how. She had once believed victory would feel like sunrise. Now it felt like holding a collapsing ceiling on her shoulders, while everyone beneath argued over the shape of the ruin. The force flowed through her like a cold river that refused to warm. She brushed against minds that were not here. Pilots in cramped cockpits tasting recycled air, gunners with blistered hands, captains who spoke calmly while their hearts battered their ribs. Their fear was a chorus. Their hope, thinner. She gathered them anyway, the way a woman might gather torn cloth and pretend it could still be stitched into a banner. A creak of boots disturbed the hush. Carth Onasi did not step lightly when he was angry. He made no apology for existing. He had learned in the Navy that men who apologized became men who were used. He hovered near the holomap without touching it, as if heat might blister him. "Bastila," he said, voice low, careful. Careful not to frighten a skittish creature, or to wake a sleeping blade. "We've got fresh reports, not rumors. Ships." Her eyes opened. The room sharpened. Rook Lamar stood like a carved accusation beside the incense bowl, his gaze fixed on her with the same suspicion he gave the whole messy business of the living. "From where?" she asked. Her throat felt raw, as if she'd been speaking for hours without sound. Carth glanced at Rook, then back to her. "Korriban. The outer rim lanes. They're moving again. Not fleeing, moving with purpose." Rook's mouth tightened. Sith are always moving with purpose. "Not like this," Carth said, and for a heartbeat his composure slipped. Grief lived close to his anger. It always had. "These aren't the last embers. It's a fire taking new shape." Bastila looked to the holomap. Red lights clustered where they should not. She reached, not with her hands, but with that other sense that had become both gift and chain. There, at the edge of perception, something sharp, disciplined and hungry, like a blade drawn slowly from a scabbard. "Revan is gone," Carth said, as if the words themselves could be weighed and found wanting. "Malak is dead. The Starforge is ash. And still," he swallowed, "still they come." Bastila's fingers curled into the fabric at her knees. She felt the old wound in her, the memory of being turned, twisted, remade by a will stronger than her own. She felt the shame of it, and the terror of how quickly she could understand the enemy's hunger. "Then the war did not end," she whispered. Rook's staff tapped once against the stone. The sound cut like a verdict. "The Republic will say it ended. The Senate will demand it ended. They will hold parades while the outer rim bleeds, and when the bleeding stains their marble floors, they will demand the Jedi clean it." Carth's jaw clenched. "The Senate's already calling a session. Emergency authority. They want you there, Bastila. They want to look at you while they decide how to spend you." "Nah. Nah." The holomap's blue light painted her hands ghost pale. Bastila stood, legs unsteady, the force still humming against her skin like lingering heat from a brand. "Let them look," she said softly, though she did not know whether she spoke to Carth or to herself. "It will not make the darkness vanish." And somewhere beyond the temple stone, beyond the glitter of Coruscant's endless night, she felt ships moving, silent teeth in the void. The Senate chamber had always been a theater, but tonight it felt like a siege hall. Pods floated in their ranks, some bright with polished wealth, others scarred from years of rationed repairs, each bearing the crest of a world or a sector like a house sigil sewn into cloth. Voices rose and fell in waves, arguments colliding with arguments until meaning dissolved into noise. There were no swords drawn here. Words did the cutting. Promises did the killing. Fear did the ruling. Bastila stood beside a cluster of Jedi in the visitor's ring, the air around her subtly tense, as if the Force itself held its breath. She felt eyes on her from every angle. Not reverent, not grateful, assessing, calculating, like merchants appraising a rare blade, how sharp, how durable, how much blood it could spill before it dulled. Senator Lizara Dunn spoke with calm authority, her voice carrying without strain. She did not shout. She did not need to. She had learned the trick of making others lean forward, eager for the next word, like courtiers listening for a king's favor. "We stand at the edge of recovery," Lysara said. "We have survived invasion, treachery, and the near ruin of our fleets. Our people hunger for peace. They hunger for trade, for rebuilding, for the simple right to sleep without sirens." Murmurs of agreement fluttered through the chamber. Carth stood below, flanked by officers whose uniforms had lost their crispness in too many sleepless nights. He looked like a man dragged into court by necessity rather than choice. Lysara's gaze lifted toward Bastila, and her smile became something sharper. Yet reports arrive of continued hostility, of Sith remnants, if that is what they are, holding worlds hostage. The question before us is not whether we desire peace. The question is how much we are willing to pay for it. No. A senator from the core world snapped, "We have already paid." "And the Outer Rim pays still," came an answer from another pod, bitter and tired. "While you count credits, our children count bodies." Lysara let the voices clash for a breath, then raised a hand. The chamber obeyed her in a way it did not obey the Chancellor's chair, empty at the chamber's peak like a throne waiting for a stronger spine. "The Jedi," Lysara said, "have been instrumental in our survival, in particular." Her gaze fixed on Bastila with open intent. "Battle meditation has turned defeat into victory more than once." Bastila felt the word like a chain tightening. Around her, one of the Jedi shifted, Vrook's presence, stern and unyielding, like a storm cloud that refused to rain. Carth's voice cut in, controlled but edged. "With respect, Senator, battle meditation isn't a resource you can requisition like fuel cells." Lysara's eyes flicked to him. "Admiral Onasi, no one is suggesting." "It's Carth," he said, and the correction came out harsher than he meant. "And yes, you are. You're suggesting we bind a Jedi to a chair and bleed victory out of her until she breaks." A ripple of outrage moved through the pods. Lysara's smile never faltered. "We are suggesting responsibility. The Jedi have long claimed to serve the Republic. The Republic now asks service in return." Bastila's fingers tightened around the edge of her robe. She remembered the Star Forge, its endless corridors, its hunger, the way it had seemed to breathe. She remembered Melak's command like a hand around her throat. She remembered the moment she turned back, the moment she chose the light again, and how fragile that choice had felt, like glass held between shaking fingers. She stepped forward before Vrook could stop her. "I will not be used," she said, voice carrying farther than she intended. "But I will not abandon the Republic either." Lysara's expression softened, the practiced sympathy of a noblewoman offering comfort while counting her advantage. "Then we are agreed. Emergency powers will be extended. Fleet mobilization will continue. And the Jedi," she inclined her head toward Bastila, as if honoring her, "will stand with us." Bastila held her chin high. If she had been less tired, she might have tasted the lie beneath the words. She tasted it anyway. She simply did not know how to spit it out without choking the people who still believed. Carth looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw the truth no senator would say aloud. This war had changed shape, but it had not loosened its grip. It had only found new ways to hold. The war room aboard the cruiser was smaller than the Senate chamber, and infinitely more honest. Here, the air was dry with recycled breath and the faint sting of ozone. Here, men and women spoke in numbers, in trajectories, in the simple language of survival. No one pretended peace was close. No one asked for applause. Admiral Dodonna stood at the head of the table, Her hands braced on the edge as if she held the whole ship steady by force of will alone. Her gaze moved over the gathered officers, pausing on Carth with a look that had once been mentorship and was now simply recognition. They had both aged in the same fire. "The reports are verified," Dodonna said. "Scout frigates confirmed 3 destroyer-class signatures in the Korriban corridor, plus a carrier we can't identify from known registry." "A new build?" Carth asked. "A stolen one," another officer said, voice tight. "We lost a yard above Forost last week. They took ships still in dry dock." Carth exhaled. Slow. "Theft. With purpose. Not raiding for supplies, but building a spine." He had seen that before, in the Mandalorian Wars, in Revan's campaigns, in the way a scattered force became an empire if you let it. Dodonna tapped the holomap. Lines shifted, red pins migrating like disease. "We have 2 choices. We continue to chase raiders across 10 sectors, bleeding ourselves thin, or we cut the head we can see." "Korriban," Carth said, and it was not a question. The name tasted like ash. Dodonna's eyes did not soften. "Korriban is a symbol as much as a world. The Sith draw strength from symbols." Carth remembered the Leviathan, the cold metal corridors, the smell of fear. He remembered Saul Karath's face, twisted by loyalty to darkness. He remembered how easily good men became tools when they believed the wrong promise. "We can strike," he said, "but we need intelligence. Not rumors, not half-ghost stories from smugglers." A young lieutenant cleared his throat. "Republic intelligence has a lead. Underworld channels. Nar Shaddaa, mostly. There's talk of a movement, people who speak Revan's name like a prayer." Carth's stomach tightened. "Revanites." Dodonna's brow furrowed. Cult." "A network," the lieutenant corrected. "They're connecting Sith remnants to sympathetic worlds. They're moving information. Credits. Weapons." "Meh." Carth stared at the red points on the map and felt something old in him, a dread that had nothing to do with ships. "If they're invoking Revan," he said slowly, "they're not trying to survive. They're trying to resurrect the war." Dodonna's voice dropped. "The Senate believes we can end this with enough force. That victory is a matter of numbers." Carth looked at her. "And you?" She held his gaze without flinching. "I believe the Sith learned from defeat. I believe they will not make the same mistake twice." A silence settled over the room, thick as smoke. Carth's hand hovered over the holomap. He pictured Bastila in the Senate chamber, surrounded by hungry eyes. He pictured the Jedi Temple, stone and quiet, trying to pretend it was not becoming a fortress. He set his finger down on Korriban. "Then we hit them before they finish learning." Outside the war room, the cruiser's engines thrummed, steady and relentless, like a heartbeat that did not know how to stop. On Daeshuan, the rain never asked permission. It fell heavy through the jungle canopy, drumming on Mandalorian armor like impatient fingers on a shield. The camp crouched in the shadow of ancient trees, its perimeter marked by motion sensors and old instincts. Fire hissed and fought to live beneath a makeshift shelter of duraplast and scavenged plating. Around it, warriors sat like wolves around a kill, their helmets off, faces lined by scars and laughter that did not reach their eyes. Canderous Ordo watched them with the quiet patience of a man who had survived enough battles to understand that victory was not the same as peace. His armor was a patchwork of old glory and practical repair, and the sigil on his shoulder, Mandalore's mark, felt heavier than any plate of Beskar. A younger warrior spat into the mud. "Republic's bleeding again," he said. "Sith are raiding the lanes. Smugglers say there's credit to be made." "There's always credit," another muttered. "There's always a war." Canderous smiled without humor. "That's not a blessing." They looked at him, waiting. Mandalorians did not kneel to philosophy. They knelt to strength. "The Republic thinks it's won," the younger warrior said. "They destroyed the Star Forge, killed their Dark Lord. What's left but scavengers?" Canderous leaned forward, elbows on his knees, firelight cutting his features into harsh angles. "Scavengers with fleets," he said. "Scavengers with Sith training. Scavengers with nothing to lose." A hush followed. In the jungle beyond their camp, something large moved. Dekshun's beasts, old predators that cared nothing for politics. One of the clan leaders, a woman with braided hair and a jagged scar across her cheek, studied Canderous. "You're thinking of joining them," she said. Not accusing, not asking. "Reading?" Canderous shrugged. "I'm thinking of keeping us alive. The clans are scattered. The old ways are broken. If we drift too long, we become raiders and nothing more." The woman's eyes narrowed. "And if we fight for the Republic?" "We take their credits," Canderous said. "We take their weapons. We take their respect if they're capable of it. And we take time to rebuild." "Nani?" A low chuckle rose around the fire. Mandalorians understood bargains. They understood taking. And if the Sith offer more, the younger warrior pressed. Canderous's gaze sharpened. "The Sith offer chains wrapped in glory. They always have. Ask the worlds they burned. Ask the warriors they used." The jungle wind shifted, bringing the scent of wet earth and something metallic, distant. Ship exhaust. A scout emerged from the darkness, helmet tucked under his arm, rainwater streaming down his face. "Leader," he said. He still called Canderous that sometimes, testing the word like a blade. "Republic envoy landed on Onderon. Wants a meeting. Says it's urgent." Canderous stood slowly. The firelight climbed his armor like blood. "Urgent," he repeated, tasting the word. The Republic had learned urgency the hard way. He looked out into the jungle where darkness pressed close and alive. He thought of Revan, how that name still moved through the galaxy like a storm no one could predict. He thought of a war that refused to die. "Fine," he said. "Let's see what the Republic wants to buy." And as the rain kept falling, indifferent and relentless, Canderous felt the old thrill of the hunt stir beneath his ribs, dangerous, familiar, and impossible to deny. Korriban's sand tasted of bones. The wind moved through the valley of the Dark Lords like a whispering crowd, stirring dust over tomb entrances that had swallowed kings. Inside one of those tombs, torches burned with a sickly green flame that cast the carvings into grotesque life. Faces of ancient Sith looked down, mouths open in silent laughter, as if they had always known this would happen. Victory promised, victory stolen, war resurrected. Darth Rythar stood beneath their gaze, unmoving. His armor drank the light. Beneath its plates, he was flesh and breath, and the same human weakness he despised, but he wore the darkness like a second skin. Around him, acolytes knelt in the dust, foreheads pressed to stone, hands shaking from ritual cuts that still bled. At his feet lay the body of a rival officer, one of the old Revanite commanders who had tried to declare himself. The man's eyes were open, staring at nothing, his throat a ruined line. The tomb smelled of blood and ancient decay. Rythar did not look down. The dead were past utility. He watched the hollow display hovering before him, blue lines for Republic lanes, red for his own. The patterns shifted as if the galaxy itself was a board, pieces sliding according to rules written by men who believed they understood fate. A tall acolyte raised his head. "Master," he said, voice hoarse. "The Republic celebrates. Their Senate speaks of rebuilding. They think the Starforge's destruction ended us." Rythar's lips curled, faint. "The Republic thinks victory is an event," he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the tomb like smoke. "Victory is a condition. Maintained. Enforced." "No, Palmagdi, Karinin." "And Revan?" another acolyte asked, unable to stop himself. The name carried both awe and fear, like a blade no one dared hold. "They say Revan vanished." "They say many things," Rythar replied. He reached out with the Force, not to choke, not to lash, but to touch the fear in the acolyte's chest and squeeze until it became obedience. Revan was a storm. Storms pass. The ruin they leave remains. He stepped closer to the holodisplay. There, a cluster of Republic assets shifted toward the outer rim. Toward Korriban. Toward him. "Let them come," Rathar murmured. A new figure entered the torchlight, an assassin wrapped in dark cloth, face hidden behind a visor. He knelt, one fist to the floor. "Report," Rathar said. "Coruscant is restless," the assassin said. "The Senate argues. The Jedi are divided. There are those who would help us." Rathar's gaze sharpened. "Names." The assassin hesitated, just a fraction. Fear made people honest, but it also made them slow. Rathar did not tolerate slowness. "Household guards," the assassin began, voice low. "Shipyard overseers. One senator who speaks of surrender. And a group on Nar Shaddaa, followers. They wear Revan's symbol as if it were a crown." "Moan." Rathar's mouth tightened. "A cult," he said with distaste. "He did not worship. He used." "They can be useful," the assassin offered cautiously. "They connect worlds. They carry messages. They believe in unity." Unity was a weapon, if held by the right hand. Rathar turned, torchlight sliding over his armor like poison. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them the war has not ended. Tell them the Republic's victory was a lie, and lies can be strangled." The assassin bowed deeper. Rathar looked past him to the carved faces of ancient Sith. He could almost hear their laughter in the wind. "They want peace," he whispered to the tomb. "We will give them ruin instead." Outside, Korriban's sand shifted under the night, and the darkness pressed close, patient and eager. Nar Shaddaa did not have temples. It had bargains. In the Undercity, beneath layers of crime and commerce stacked like rot, a room had been cleared. If you could call a space cleared when its walls were still made of scrap and its roof leaked neon-tinted rain. The air smelled of oil, sweat, and desperation. A crowd pressed close, faces half-lit by a flickering holoprojector that replayed the destruction of the Star Forge again and again, as if watching the great machine die might make their own lives feel less small. At the center stood Vel Arden. The mask on Vel's face was not Revan's. No one living could claim that relic, but it was shaped in reverence, worn and repainted so often the edges had softened like a tool gripped too long. Beneath it, a voice spoke with practiced calm. "They tell you the war ended," Vel said. "They tell you the Republic is saved. They tell you the Jedi return to their towers, pure and wise." A bitter laugh rose from the crowd. Vel lifted a hand. Silence fell. "Look around," Vel continued. "Nar Shaddaa is not rebuilt. Your children are not fed. The core worlds throw feasts while the rim scrapes bone from the plate. The Senate calls it recovery. We call it abandonment." "Menida." A man in a merchant coat spat. "What do you want from us?" he demanded. "Credits? Blood?" Vel's head tilted. The mask caught the failing light, making the expression unreadable. "I want you to remember," Vel said softly. "Not the lies they feed you, the truth." The holoprojector flared, showing the Star Forge's burning shell, ships fleeing like insects from a dying fire. The crowd watched, hungry for meaning. "Revan understood," Vel said. "Revan saw what the Jedi refused to see, what the Senate refused to admit. The Republic is weak. It decays from within. It will always choose comfort over survival." A woman near the front whispered, almost reverent, "Revan will return." Vel let the whisper spread. Hope was contagious. So was fanaticism. "Return," Vel echoed, then lowered the hand slowly, as if placing a blade on a table. "Maybe. But return is not a miracle. It is a work. A road." A ripple moved through the crowd, equal parts fear and exhilaration. "We are not Sith," Vel said, voice steady. "We are not Jedi. We are the ones who have been trampled between them. We are the ones who will not be trampled again. Behind the words, the room's edges held watchers. Armed men and women with hard eyes, people who did not believe in speeches but believed in leverage. Vel's movement had grown beyond prayer. It had become logistics. Contacts in shipyards, safe routes, hidden caches of weapons. A network woven in the cracks of the Republic's attention. Tonight, Vel said, we carry messages. Tonight, we remind the scattered fleets that they are not alone. Tonight, we gather the embers. Nay, and what then? The merchant demanded again, voice cracking. What then, masked prophet? Vel leaned closer. Rain dripped from the ceiling onto the mask, sliding down like tears that were not real. Then, Vel said, the Jedi Civil War becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a revolt, not a rebellion, a cleansing. The crowd's breath rose as one, a single creature inhaling. Somewhere above the Undercity, Nar Shaddaa's neon bled into the rain, and ships passed overhead, indifferent. Vel watched the holoprojector's dying light, and imagined the galaxy as a wound that could only heal after it was cut deeper. The council chamber was quieter than the Senate, and in that quiet Bastila felt the weight of judgment more keenly. Here, the walls did not echo with speeches. They held their breath. Statues of past masters stared down with calm stone faces that had never had to endure the modern Republic's hunger. The floor's inlaid star maps gleamed faintly, reflecting candlelight like a shallow lake. Bastila stood at its center and wondered how many people had been condemned on this same patterned stone. Vrook's voice broke the hush. You spoke out of turn. Bastila did not bow her head. I spoke the truth. Several masters shifted, robes whispering. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others watched her like one watches a blade, admiring its sharpness while fearing where it might cut. The Senate is not our enemy, one master said gently. Bastila's gaze snapped toward him. No, she agreed. That is what frightens me. Vrook's eyes narrowed. Your fear has led you astray once. The words hit like a slap. Bastila kept her face still, but her stomach tightened. She could feel the memory of it, the way the dark side had wrapped itself around her certainty and squeezed until she mistook obedience for strength. I have not forgotten, she said, voice low. Do not think I need reminding. Vrook stepped closer, his staff tapping against stone. Then you will understand why the council must decide your role. My role. As if she were a tool on a rack. The Republic requires battle meditation, another master said, and his tone was careful, as if speaking around a sleeping beast. Without it, our fleets will suffer. Worlds will fall. Nay. And with it? Bastila asked. How many times can I stretch my mind across the stars before it snaps? How many lives do you intend to hang on the thread of my focus? Silence answered her. Not because they had no response, but because the response was ugly. Vrook's jaw tightened. Sacrifice is not optional. Sacrifice is not demanded by those who will not pay it, Bastila shot back. A sharp inhale sounded from one of the younger Jedi standing at the chamber's edge, a knight who had survived the war by becoming skilled at killing. Bastila did not know his name. She only knew the look in his eyes. Admiration, hunger, the beginning of a dangerous idea. A master spoke again, voice softer. Bastila, we do not seek to harm you. Bastila almost laughed. Harm did not require malice. Harm required need. I will serve, she said, forcing steadiness into her words. But not as a chained beast. If I am to use battle meditation, I choose when and how. And I will not be placed under Senate authority. Vrook's gaze hardened. You forget yourself. Bastila met his eyes. No, she said. I remember myself. There's the difference. No. Vrook raised his staff slightly, as if about to deliver a sentence. The council will assign guards, Jedi, not soldiers. You will remain under observation. Not punishment, precaution. Observation. The word tasted like iron. Bastila felt the net tightening around her. It was not Sith chains. It was a Jedi's careful rope, woven from good intentions and fear. She nodded once, because refusal would become rebellion, and rebellion would become a wound the Sith could widen. "As you wish," she said. But as she turned to leave, she felt it again, far away, sharp and hungry. The sense of ships moving with purpose. The Force's cold river pulling towards something darker than Korriban's tombs. The Council thought it could manage her. The Senate thought it could spend her. The Sith thought it could break her. Bastila walked out of the chamber with her spine straight and her heart heavy, knowing none of them understood the cost of what they were demanding. The gardens were meant to be a sanctuary. Bastila had always found them a little too curated, nature arranged into obedience. But tonight even the ordered trees felt like mercy. Lanterns glowed beneath stone arches, their warm light fighting the Coruscant night. Beyond the garden wall, the city's lights spread in endless patterns, a sea of artificial stars. The air smelled faintly of wet soil and the distant tang of vehicle exhaust. Somewhere, water trickled, persistent and soft. Jolie Bindo leaned against a pillar like a man who had never been impressed by pillars. His robes were worn, patched in places, and he looked at the world with an expression that suggested he'd seen too much of it, and decided to remain amused anyway. "Council got you chasing your tail again?" he asked. Bastila's fingers hovered above the still surface of a pool. The water reflected the lanterns as broken gold. "They call it observation," she said. Jolie snorted. "They call a lot of things by nicer names than they deserve." She glanced at him. "You should not speak of the Council that way." "Shouldn't I?" Jolie's eyes crinkled. "Kid, I've been around long enough to know that should is the favorite word of people who want you to live their life instead of yours." Bastila's mouth tightened. She looked back at the pool. Her reflection stared up at her, pale, controlled, a face that had become a symbol. She hated the symbol. She feared what it demanded. "They want me in the war," she said quietly. "Not as a Jedi, as a weapon." Jolie's humor faded just a fraction. "You've been a weapon since the day they noticed you could do what you do." "That is not fair," Bastila said, though she did not know whom she defended, the Council or herself. "Fair?" Jolie repeated, and the word came out like a laugh that had lost its joy. "You want fair? Go talk to the Senate. They'll sell it to you in a pretty box." Bastila's hands clenched. "I can feel it," she admitted, voice barely above the water's whisper. "The war, it's not fading. It's changing, like a wound that scabs and splits and bleeds again." Jolie studied her for a long moment. "You ever hear the old stories about the dark side?" he asked. "Yes," Bastila said. 1,000 times. "Then you've heard the part where it doesn't need you to be evil," Jolie said. "It just needs you to be tired." Bastila swallowed. She felt tired down to her bones. "They want me to hold fleets together with my mind," she said. "To make pilots braver, to make captains sharper, to make soldiers kill without shaking. If I do it long enough, what will be left of me? What will I become?" Jolie's gaze softened, not pitying, but recognizing. "You'll become what you choose," he said. "That's the only thing that's ever been true." Bastila's laugh came out brittle. "Choice," she said, tasting the word. "When the Senate demands, the Council orders, and the Sith hunt." Jolie pushed off the pillar and stepped closer. "Listen," he said, voice low. "The galaxy's full of people who will tell you what you are. Jedi, Sith, hero, traitor, weapon, girl. They'll carve you into whatever shape suits them. Don't let them." Bastila stared at him, and for the first time tonight she felt something warm in her chest. Small, fragile, real. "And if I fail?" she asked. Jolie's grin returned, sharp and crooked. "Then you get back up and try again," he said. Same as everyone else who's ever mattered. The lantern light trembled in the pool as wind moved through the garden, and Bastila let her hands lower until her fingertips brushed the water. Ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection, breaking the perfect image the temple preferred. In the broken pattern she saw something truer: motion, change, survival. The safe house was in one of Coruscant's older districts, far from the polished avenues where senators paraded their concern. Here, the streets were narrow, the buildings close enough to block the sky, and the air smelled of wet duracrete and frying oil from vendors who never asked questions. Inside, the room was small, lit by a single lamp that made the corners feel thick and secretive. Maps were spread across the table, real paper in places, not just holograms, because paper didn't leave a digital trail. Notes in coded shorthand lay beside them, the kind of work the Senate pretended did not exist. Mission Val perched on the edge of a chair, legs bouncing. Her grin was too sharp for her age, a grin built from surviving things children shouldn't have to survive. "Told you we'd hear something," she said, tapping a finger on a smudged star chart. "Nar Shaddaa's talking. People always talk there. It's like they can't help it." Zalbar stood behind her, silent as a wall, his broad shoulders nearly brushing the ceiling. His hands flexed and unflexed, claws scraping faintly against his palms. The city made him uneasy. It was too crowded, too boxed in, too full of eyes that did not belong to his tribe. HK-47 stood in the corner, blaster held with almost tender attention. The droid's head tilted as it polished the weapon, as if listening to a private joke. "Observation," HK said in its cheerful, wrong voice. "The organic tendency toward loose speech in exchange for stimulants remains a reliable method of intelligence gathering. Suggestion, purchase more stimulants." Mission shot the droid a look. "We're not buying spice for your methods, HK." "Disappointed statement," HK replied, as if sincerely wounded. "My methods have proven efficient. The meatbag's objections are inefficient." Carth ignored the bickering. He leaned over the table, eyes narrowed at a set of coordinates Mission had circled. "This is where your contact says the meetings happen?" he asked. Mission nodded. "Undercity, near the old docking bays. They call it a shrine. They're not hiding it. They're proud of it." "Revanites," Carth muttered. The name felt wrong in his mouth, like calling a fever a friend. Zalbar let out a low growl, a sound that carried both warning and grief. Carth glanced up at him. He had learned to read the Wookiees' expressions over the war, learned that silence could be a sentence. "They're using Revan," Carth said, more to himself than to them. "Using the legend to pull people in." Mission's grin faded. "It's not just legends," she said, voice quieter. "They're moving stuff, weapons. I heard about a shipyard foreman who vanished last week. People say he didn't run. He was taken." Carth's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "Dodonna was right," he said. "This isn't random. It's organized." HK's head turned, photoreceptors bright. "Query, if the enemy is organized, would it not be efficient to eliminate key organizers?" Suggestion. Targeted assassination. Mission snorted. "Yeah? And then what, HK? We become Sith?" HK's tone remained cheerful. "Correction. Becoming Sith would require ritual and ideology. I am merely suggesting killing." Carth closed his eyes for a brief moment. He could feel the war seeping into everything, into jokes, into arguments, into what the word necessary now meant. "We're going to Nar Shaddaa," he said. "I want names, faces, proof. I want to know who's pulling the strings before the Senate decides the answer is to pull harder on the rope." "Me. Mission's grin returned, but it was edged now. "Undercover?" she asked. Carth looked at her. She was younger than the war, but the war had carved itself into her anyway. "Undercover," he confirmed. Zalbar's growl softened into something like agreement. HK lifted its blaster. Enthusiastic statement. "I will prepare suitable ammunition for undercover operations." Mission rolled her eyes. That's not how undercover works. HK paused, then added, clarification. I will prepare ammunition and refrain from announcing my intentions loudly. This compromise seems fair. Carth almost smiled. Almost. Outside, Coruscant's rain tapped against the window, steady and patient. In the distance, somewhere beyond the city's light, the stars held fleets and secrets. Carth felt the pull of it, toward Nar Shaddaa, toward Korriban, toward a war that had learned to wear new masks. The first ambush came without drama. One moment the convoy moved through the corridor like a line of weary beasts, engines steady, escorts flanking with disciplined spacing. The next, space tore open with streaks of light, as Sith fighters dropped from hyperspace behind them, black shapes against the starfield, and the calm shattered into alarms and shouted commands. Carth stood on the bridge with his hands on the rail, knuckles white. He watched the tactical display bloom with red contacts like spilled blood. "Shields up!" someone barked. "Fighters launch!" The convoy's freighters lumbered, trying to bring their guns to bear, but they were haulers, not warships. They carried food, medical supplies, replacement parts for shipyards, everything the Republic needed to pretend it could rebuild. The Sith didn't care about pretending. The Sith cared about starving worlds until those worlds begged for anyone, to offer order. Blaster fire lanced across the viewport. One freighter took a hit and spun, slow and helpless, venting atmosphere in a pale cloud that looked almost like breath in winter. "Bastila," Carth said into the comm, and the single word carried more weight than a speech. "Now." She sat on the bridge deck, ringed by a small circle of Jedi guards who looked too young and too tense. Her eyes were closed, her face too still. For a heartbeat, Carth wondered if she heard him at all. Then he felt it. Not with his hands or his ears, but with the part of him that had learned to sense Bastila's presence like pressure in the air. The force shifted. The bridge seemed to tighten, as if the ship itself held its breath. On the tactical display, the Republic's fighter squadrons moved with sudden cohesion. Their formations snapped into place like a blade assembled from scattered parts. Pilots who had been afraid became focused. Gunners who had been shaking steadied. The bridge crew's voices sharpened, their movements less frantic, more precise. Battle meditation did not make men immortal. It did not stop blaster bolts. It did something subtler and more terrifying. It took the chaos of fear and arranged it into function. Carth watched as two Sith fighters broke formation to dive on a freighter. Republic interceptors met them at the perfect angle, cutting them off, driving them into a crossfire. One Sith ship exploded, a brief flower of light, then nothing. "Good hit," an officer breathed as if surprised to still be alive. But the Sith were not here to win a clean battle. They were here to remind the Republic that nowhere was safe. A new contact flashed on the display, larger, heavier. "Destroyer signature," the sensor tech said, voice tight. "Came in behind the fighters." Carth's stomach dropped. "How did we miss?" "Stealth dampeners," someone replied. "They've upgraded." Carth looked down at Bastila. Sweat beaded on her brow. Her breathing had become shallow. Her hands resting on her knees trembled faintly. "Can you hold?" Carth asked, though he knew she wasn't listening the way a person listened. She was listening to hundreds of minds across kilometers of void. The destroyer fired. A lance of green energy struck the escort frigate on the convoy's flank. The frigate's shields flared, held, then collapsed. The second shot tore through its hull. The ship broke apart, slow and horrible, pieces spinning away like bones scattered by a careless hand. A cry went up on the bridge. Someone swore. Someone else whispered a name into their palm as if the dead could hear. Bastila's face tightened, as if she had felt the deaths like cuts. Carth forced his voice steady. "All ships, break and run," he ordered. "Convoy, jump to secondary coordinates. Escorts, cover them." If the Sith wanted blood, he would deny them the larger feast. The convoy's freighters began to jump, one by one, vanishing into hyperspace with desperate urgency. Sith fighters chased, but Republic pilots moved like a single organism, blocking, harrying, sacrificing position to protect the slow ships. Carth watched the last freighter vanish. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. The destroyer turned as if considering pursuit. Then, unexpectedly, it pulled back. A trap, Carth thought. Or a message. Bastila swayed, eyes still closed. One of the Jedi guards reached toward her, uncertain, then caught her as she slumped. Carth stepped closer, ignoring the eyes on him. "Bastila," he said again, softer this time. Her eyes opened, unfocused. For a second, he saw terror there. Not of death, but of something deeper. Something that had brushed her mind in the darkness between ships. "They're learning," she whispered, voice barely audible over the bridge's hum. "They're becoming more than remnants." Then her eyes fluttered shut again, and her head fell against the guard's shoulder like a crown too heavy to wear. Coruscant's Senate corridors were too clean to belong to a galaxy at war. Polished marble reflected the lanterns in long, pale streaks. Formal guards stood at intervals, armor gleaming, their posture stiff with the idea that ceremony could substitute for security. Rainwater tracked in from the outside made the floors slick in places, and servants hurried to wipe it away as if wet stone were the real threat. Carth walked fast, anger driving him like a spur. He had left the cruiser only hours ago, left behind the smell of scorched circuits and blood, and the Senate greeted him with perfume and politics. Lysara fell into step beside him as if she had been waiting for his shadow. "Admiral Carth," she corrected smoothly. "I'm sorry about the escort frigate. We all are." Carth didn't slow. "Save your sorrow," he said. "We need ships. We need crews. We need the Senate to stop pretending this is a problem we can legislate away." Lysara's expression remained sympathetic, which only made him want to grind his teeth. "We are allocating funds," she said. "Shipyard reconstruction, recruitment drives, relief shipments that get ambushed," Carth snapped. Lysara's eyes flicked toward him, sharp now. "And yet the convoy survived." "Because Bastila nearly killed herself holding it together," Carth said, voice low and dangerous. "And you're about to ask her to do it again." Lysara sighed as if burdened by unfortunate reality. "The Republic needs her." "The Republic needs a lot of things," Carth replied. "It doesn't get to take them all from one person." They reached a junction where the corridor widened, pods of senators drifting overhead like silent vultures. Lysara stopped, forcing Carth to stop with her. "Carth," she said quietly, dropping the practice projection. "Do you think I enjoy this? Do you think I want to push a Jedi to the edge? I have worlds calling my office every hour. Worlds begging for protection. Worlds threatening secession if we cannot defend them. If the Republic fractures, the Sith won't have to conquer us. We'll do it for them." Carth stared at her. For a moment, he almost believed her. Almost. "And what do you want from me?" he asked. Lysara's smile returned, subtle. "I want you to stand with us," she said. "Not just as a soldier, as a voice the people trust, as a symbol." The word hit like a blade. Symbol. That was how they thought. Not in lives. In stories. "I'm not your banner," Carth said. Lysara's gaze drifted past him, toward the far end of the corridor where Bastila walked with Jedi escorts. She moved like a woman made of glass, beautiful, controlled, and one wrong touch from shattering. Her head was held high because she refused to let anyone see her weakness. The escorts around her looked like guards around a prisoner. "None of us are banners," Lysara said softly. "And yet we are all being carried into battle." Carth's hand drifted toward his sidearm without conscious thought. Something in the corridor felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. The formal guard's eyes moved, scanning, but their movements were slow, ceremonial. A servant passed with a cleaning cloth, head bowed, moving too close, too fast. Carth's instincts flared. "Down!" he shouted, and lunged. The servant's hand snapped up, not with a cloth, but with a small injector, thin and gleaming. The needle drove toward Carth's neck. Carth slammed the attacker into the wall. The injector clattered to the marble. Chaos erupted. Guards surged. Senators shouted. Bastila's escorts ignited lightsabers, the sudden hum slicing through the corridor like a war drum. The attacker, no servant at all, twisted with unnatural speed, eyes blank, mouth foaming as if poisoned from within. He reached for something at his belt. Carth grabbed his wrist. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The attacker's lips peeled back in a smile that was not human in its emptiness. "The war," he rasped, and then he bit down hard on something in his mouth. His body convulsed, then went limp. Carth stared down at the dead man's face and felt his blood run cold. This was not a simple assassination. This was a message sent with fanatic precision. Behind him, Bastila stood with her saber lit, its blue glow washing her features in ghostlight. Her eyes met Carth's over the dead man's body. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The assassin didn't die alone. As guards swarmed the corridor and senators screamed for safety, another figure slipped away through a maintenance door, moving like a shadow that had learned the building's bones. Carth saw it, caught the motion out of the corner of his eye, and everything in him snapped into pursuit. He ran without waiting for permission. The Republic's rules could choke on their own paperwork. The maintenance door slammed behind the fleeing figure. Carth shoved through and found himself in a service tunnel that smelled of steam and old water. Pipes lined the walls like ribs. Emergency lights flickered in strips, turning the world into alternating pulses of red and darkness. Ahead, footsteps splashed through shallow runoff. "Stop!" Carth shouted, blaster raised. The figure didn't slow. Bastila appeared behind him, moving with the silent speed of someone who had trained her body to obey without thought. Her lightsaber was ignited, held low, its blue glow painting the tunnel in cold fire. "Carth," she said, voice tight. "Be careful." As if he had a choice. They chased the figure deeper. The tunnel narrowed, then split. The runner veered left without hesitation, knowing the route. A planned escape. A map. Help. Carth's anger sharpened into focus. "How many?" he muttered. "How many are in this city?" The figure glanced back for the first time. In the flicker of light, Carth saw a face. Young, pale, eyes too bright, jaw clenched with something like devotion. Not a hired killer. A believer. The figure's mouth moved, forming words Carth couldn't hear over the roar of steam. Bastila's presence brushed his mind like a warning. "He's trained," she whispered. "Not in the Jedi way. Not fully Sith. But something. May I know?" The runner skidded around a corner and came to a halt at a sealed door, fingers flying over a panel. The door did not open fast enough. Carth fired. The blaster bolt struck the wall beside the runner, scorching Durasteel. The figure flinched but did not turn. Bastila stepped forward, lightsaber lifting. The runner spun, and Carth saw something in the hand. A small sphere, no larger than a fruit, faintly pulsing. "Don't!" Bastila shouted. Too late. The sphere hit the ground and burst into a cloud of dark powder that rose like smoke but moved wrong, clinging to the air as if the air itself thickened. Carth coughed, eyes burning. His throat tightened. The taste was metallic and bitter. Bastila moved faster than he could track, sweeping her saber in a controlled arc that dispersed part of the cloud, the blade's heat burning it into thin, stinking vapor. Her other hand lifted, fingers splayed, and Carth felt the force press outward like a sudden wind, shoving the remaining powder back. The runner staggered under the invisible blow, slammed against the sealed door. The pulsing panel beeped in protest. Carth lunged, grabbing the runner by the collar, slamming him hard enough that the man's teeth clicked. "Who are you?" Carth demanded. "Who sent you?" The runner's eyes were wild, but his voice was calm. "My name is Keston," he said, and the calm made Carth's skin crawl. "Keston Drack." Bastila's gaze narrowed. "You were in the corridor," she said. "You planned it." Keston's lips curved faintly. "We planned all of it," he replied. "You thought the war ended because you burned a factory." Carth shook him. "Answer me." Keston's gaze flicked past Carth to Bastila. Something like hunger showed in his eyes. "They fear you," he said softly. "They want you chained. They will pretend it's for your own good. They always do." Bastila's jaw tightened. "Who is they?" Keston smiled. "The ones who remember," he said. "The ones who will not let the Republic rot in comfort." He jerked suddenly, not trying to escape but reaching for his own mouth. Bastila's hand snapped out, force gripping his jaw open. A small capsule fell from his tongue to the tunnel floor, rolling, gleaming. Carth's breath caught. Poison. Suicide. Another fanatic ready to die rather than speak. Bastila stared at the capsule as if it were a serpent. "Revanites," she whispered. Keston laughed softly, even as Bastila's invisible grip held him. "Call us what you want," he said. "Names don't matter. Only the war matters." The sealed door behind him finally slid open with a hiss. Cold air spilled out, carrying the sound of distant machinery. And somewhere beyond, the heartbeat hum of a ship's engines. Keston's eyes widened, surprised, a flicker of fear. He had expected help. Instead, he saw something else. Carth turned, blaster raised. In the open doorway stood no ally, no rescue team, only darkness, and the faint silhouette of someone watching from beyond the light. Then the silhouette was gone, and the door began to close again, sealing secrets behind duress steel. Bastila released Keston's jaw. His laughter died on his lips. For the first time, he looked uncertain. And in that uncertainty, Carth understood. Whatever network had sent these assassins was not a single hand. It was many hands, pulling in different directions, tightening the noose around the Republic one careful tug at a time. On Korriban, news traveled faster than ships. A holotransmission flickered in the carved war room, casting pale light over rock walls etched with ancient victories. Rythar watched the image of Coruscant's Senate district. Grainy, distorted. Then the brief chaos of guards converging, lightsabers igniting, bodies falling. The feed cut abruptly, but the message remained. They could reach the heart. Across from him stood Vexa, a warlord with a hood drawn low and silk wrapped around the lower half of her face. Scars traced her cheekbones like cracked porcelain. She held herself with the poised stillness of a predator that had learned patience. "You strike at their throat," Vexa said, voice muffled by the silk. "Bold?" Rythar's gaze didn't leave the holodisplay. "Not bold," he corrected. "Necessary." Vexa's eyes narrowed. "I've heard that word from too many men who wanted to excuse cruelty." Rythar finally looked at her. "Cruelty is a tool," he said. "The Republic believes itself protected by ceremony. We remind them they bleed." Vexa's fingers traced the edge of a dagger at her belt. "You're making enemies," she said. "Not just the Republic. Other warlords. The ones who want to hide in the Rim and pretend they're kings." "Nani. Nani." "Let them pretend," Rythar replied. "Their pretending makes them predictable." Vexa's gaze flicked to the soldiers standing in silent ranks. "And the cult?" she asked. "The ones wearing Revan's symbol?" Rythar's mouth tightened. "They are useful noise," he said. "They stir discontent. They move supplies. They draw attention. And they believe they can command you," Vexa said, amusement sharp in her eyes. Rythar stepped closer, his presence filling the space like pressure. "No one commands me." Vexa held his gaze without flinching. "Then be careful," she said. "Believers are harder to control than mercenaries. They will die smiling." Rythar's eyes darkened. He knew. He had used that devotion before. He had seen it in Sith acolytes, in Republic patriots, in Jedi who called their obedience virtue. "What do you want, Vexa?" he asked. She tilted her head. Alliance, she said simply. The Republic is pushing toward Korriban. They think to cut off our spine before it grows. If you fall, they will come for me next. If I fall, they will come for you. Nah. Rythar considered her. Alliances among Sith warlords were like ropes made of sand, useful only until the first strong wind. Terms, he said. Vex's eyes gleamed. We share fleets, she said. We coordinate strikes. We bleed them slowly, not in one glorious battle that gives them a martyr's victory. We make their senate choke on fear. Rythar's mind flicked, calculating. And in return? Vex's voice softened. In return, when the Republic collapses, when their worlds beg for order, we divide what remains. Rythar stared at the ancient reliefs carved into the rock, Sith warriors standing over fallen Jedi, faces triumphant. He felt the dark side's familiar pull warm his blood. Agreed, he said. Vex's eyes narrowed, as if surprised by his quick acceptance. You trust me. Rythar's lips curved. No, he said. But I understand you. That's enough. He turned back to the holodisplay and enlarged the marker over Coruscant. They will respond, he murmured. They always respond with force. They cannot imagine another language. Now, Vexa leaned in slightly. And the Jedi? She asked. The one with battle meditation? Rythar's gaze sharpened. Bastila, he said, tasting the name. She is the Republic's crutch. We break the crutch toy. Vex's eyes gleamed. Careful, she warned. Crutches can become spears. Rythar's expression did not change, but something in him tightened, eager. Let her try, he said. Outside the war room, Korriban's wind howled through tomb entrances, and the ancient Sith faces carved into stone seemed to smile a little wider. Onderon's palace courtyards were built for ceremony, not negotiation with wolves. Rain fell in fine sheets, turning the stones slick and making the banners cling to their poles like exhausted soldiers. A line of Republic Marines stood at the courtyard's edge, hands hovering near their weapons, their helmets reflecting dull light. Opposite them stood Mandalorians with relaxed posture that meant they were ready to kill. Captain Talia Ven kept her shoulders squared and her voice steady, though the damp crawled into her uniform and the tension tasted like metal. Canderous, she said, using the name like a bridge she hoped wouldn't collapse. Thank you for meeting. Canderous looked at her the way a veteran looked at a fresh recruit, measuring, not unkind, but unimpressed. Your message said urgent, he replied. Urgent usually means someone wants something fast and cheap. Talia's mouth tightened. Nothing about this will be cheap, she said. The Sith are reorganizing. They've hit convoys near the Korriban lanes. We're mobilizing a strike. One of the Mandalorian clan leaders, a woman with scarred cheekbones, snorted. The Republic mobilizes strikes the way nobles throw parties, she said. Loud, expensive, and full of mistakes. Canderous didn't rebuke her. He watched Talia, eyes narrowed. So why call us? He asked. You don't like Mandalorians. Your Senate doesn't trust us. Your Jedi look at us like a disease. Talia held his gaze. Because you're fighters, she said. And because you know the Outer Rim. Our fleets are stretched thin. We need allies who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. The scarred leader laughed. Listen to that, she said. The Republic asking us to be dirty so their hands can stay clean. Talia ignored her. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a sealed datapad. Terms, she said, offering it to Canderous. Payment, salvage rights, autonomy over your own units, no Jedi command over Mandalorian troops. Canderous's brow lifted slightly. Someone in your command structure has learned, he said. Talia's eyes flicked, just once, to the Marines behind her, then back. We learn when we're forced, she admitted. And we're forced now. Canderous took the datapad, glanced at it, then looked back at her. What does the Republic really want? He asked quietly. Not in credits, in truth. Talia hesitated, then spoke anyway. We want to keep the Republic from breaking apart, she said. Worlds are threatening to secede. Senators are hoarding resources. People are losing faith. If we can land a decisive blow, if we can show strength, we buy time. Canderous studied her face. He saw exhaustion there, and something else. Fear not of death, but of failure. Strength, he repeated. That's always the answer in the end. Talia nodded. Will you come? Canderous looked past her at the palace walls, at guards who pretended the outside world didn't exist. He thought of Mandalore's clans scattered like teeth knocked from a jaw. He thought of a war that never truly ended, only shifted into new forms. He handed the data pad back. We'll come, he said. The scarred leader's eyes widened. Mandalore. Canderous cut her off with a glance. We'll come, he repeated, voice harder. On our terms. Talia exhaled, slow, as if she'd been holding her breath since landing. Agreed, she said. Canderous leaned closer, rain beating on his armor. And Captain, he added, voice low enough that only she could hear. Don't mistake this for loyalty. This is strategy. Talia met his gaze. I wouldn't dare, she said. As they turned away from each other, the courtyard's tension did not ease. It simply shifted, like a blade changing hands. Dantooine was quieter than Bastila remembered. The Enclave had been a place of voices once, students laughing softly, masters speaking in measured tones, the faint hum of lightsabers during practice sessions. Now, it was a skeleton. Stone walls lay cracked and blackened, their edges softened by wind and creeping vines that did not care who had died here. Statues toppled, their faces shattered, eyes blind. Bastila walked among the ruins as if stepping through a memory too sharp to touch. Her boots crunched over broken tile. Ash clung to the seams of stone like old grief. She had come alone, ignoring the council's protests, slipping away between assignments while the Senate argued and the fleets moved. She told herself it was for meditation, for clarity. She did not tell herself the deeper truth. She needed to stand where the Order had bled and remember that the Jedi were not invincible. A faint wind moved through the ruins, carrying the scent of grass and distant rain. It stirred ash into thin spirals that rose and vanished. Bastila stopped where the main council chamber had once stood. Only half the wall remained, and beyond it the sky opened wide, pale and indifferent. She remembered kneeling here years ago, being told she was special, being praised for discipline. She remembered believing in the Order with the ferocity of a young woman desperate for certainty. She also remembered the moment that certainty cracked. Bastila closed her eyes and let the Force wash through the ruin. The place was scarred, but it still held echoes. Impressions left by lives ended in terror. She felt panic like a sudden flash of cold. She felt the last stand of a master whose name she could not summon, only the sensation of defiance. And beneath it all, beneath the grief, she felt something darker. Not the Sith that had attacked, but the residue the attack had left behind. A stain. A reminder that darkness did not merely kill. It lingered. Her breath trembled. She steadied it. Why did we think it would end? She whispered, though no one answered. A movement at the edge of her awareness drew her attention. She turned and saw a figure in the distance. An old settler holding a lamp, watching her with cautious eyes. Not approaching, not fleeing, just observing, like the Council, like the Senate, like the whole galaxy watching to see what she would become. Bastila's throat tightened. She wanted to tell the settler that the Jedi would protect them, that the Republic would hold. The words felt too easy, too much like the lies spoken in the Senate chamber. Instead, she lifted a hand, palm out, a simple gesture of acknowledgement. The settler hesitated, then returned the gesture, lamplight trembling in the wind. Bastila turned back to the ruins. She knelt where the floor was cracked, where weeds pushed through stone. She placed her hands on the ground and felt the cold seep into her skin. In the distance, thunder murmured. She reached out with her mind, not toward fleets, not toward senators, not toward the war, but toward herself. Toward the part of her that still believed the light was worth the cost. In the Force's quiet, she felt another echo. Faint, far away, like a voice carried across a canyon. Not a memory of this place. Something else. Something beyond the known lanes. A pressure in the dark that made her teeth ache. Revan had gone into that darkness. And now, with the war refusing to die, Bastila felt the darkness looking back. The antechamber stank of old incense and hot stone. Vel's boots left faint prints in the dust as Vel stepped beneath the green torchlight. The mask was tucked under one arm, its weathered surface catching the sickly glow. Without it, Vel's face looked younger than the voice had suggested. Young enough to still believe in purity, old enough to have buried something precious. Rythar waited ahead, unmoving, armored like a knight carved from darkness. 2 acolytes stood behind him, their eyes fixed on Vel with the wary attention of hounds. One looked eager, as if hoping to learn by watching. The other trembled. A small chest sat between Vel and Rythar, lid open, credits, codes, access keys. The currency of modern war. Vel did not bow. Vel did not kneel. Revanites did not kneel to Sith. "We offer you structure," Vel said, voice steady in the tomb's hush. "The Republic is fractured. Your warlords are fractured. Without unity, you will be hunted down one by one." Rythar's gaze lingered on Vel's bare face. "Unity," he repeated, and the words sounded like contempt. "You speak of unity as if it can be purchased." Vel's jaw tightened. "It can be built," Vel said. "We have contacts in shipyards, in Senate offices, in the underworld. We move supplies where your fleets cannot. We can connect you." Rythar's voice was quiet. "And what do you want?" Vel's fingers tightened around the mask's edge. "We want the war to mean something," Vel said, and conviction sharpened the words into a weapon. "We want a republic strong enough to survive what's coming, not this bloated, corrupt thing that collapses at the first hard wind." Rythar's eyes narrowed. "What's coming?" he echoed. "You speak like a prophet." Vel held the gaze. "Revan saw threats beyond the rim," Vel said. Revan went to face them. A flicker crossed Rythar's expression. Interest, quickly smothered. "Revan is gone." "Gone," Vel agreed. "Not dead." One of the acolytes sucked in a breath, as if the words were blasphemy. Rythar took one step forward. The air seemed to tighten around him. "You wear a mask and think it makes you wise," he said. "You speak Revan's name and think it binds me." Vel did not flinch. "Revan's name binds the galaxy," Vel replied. "That is why you fear it." Rythar's hand moved, slow, deliberate, toward the open chest. He did not touch the credits. He hovered his fingers over them as if feeling for poison. "You want to build unity," Rythar said. "Then prove you can control your believers." Vel's mouth tightened. "They are not mine to control," Vel said. "They are mine to guide." Rythar's gaze sharpened. "Believers do not like guidance. They like orders wrapped in destiny." Vel's eyes flashed. "And Sith like chains wrapped in glory." Vel shot back. The trembling acolyte shifted, fear rising. The eager one leaned forward, hungry for violence. Rythar's voice dropped, dangerous and almost amused. "Careful," he said. "You stand in a tomb of dark lords." Vel lifted the mask slightly, letting its worn surface catch the torchlight. "Then you know what tombs are for," Vel said quietly. "They are where old kings rot, or where new kings are made." A long silence stretched between them. Then Rythar smiled, thin, sharp. "Very well," he said. "Guide your believers. Move your supplies. Feed my fleets." Vel's chest loosened with relief, but Vel did not show it. "And in return?" Rythar's smile did not reach his eyes. "In return," he said. "You will watch as the Republic's peace burns away, and you will call it cleansing." Vel stared at him, trying to decide if this was victory or a bargain with a beast. In the tomb's green light, the answer felt the same. The temple had always taught that fear was the path to darkness. In the interrogation room, fear was simply a tool. Padawan Jace Malden stood near the wall with his hands clenched behind his back, trying to look like a Jedi and not like a boy who had never seen peace. His braid felt heavier than usual. His stomach churned, but he kept his face still. That was the lesson, wasn't it? Control. Calm. The mask of serenity. Across the room, a prisoner sat chained to a chair. The hood hid the prisoner's face, but the wrists were visible, raw where the binders had chafed, fingers trembling from exhaustion or withdrawal. The prisoner smelled of sweat and cheap spice. Rook stood over the table like a judgment given shape. Candlelight flickered across his features, making them seem harsher, older, carved by anger rather than age. "The symbol," Rook said, voice flat. "Explain it." The prisoner's head lifted slightly. A laugh rasped from beneath the hood. "It's just a mark," the prisoner said. "It scares you because you remember." Rook's eyes narrowed. The Jedi do not fear symbols. The prisoner's shoulders shook with a dry chuckle. "Then why bring me here?" the prisoner asked. "Why chain me like an animal?" Jace's throat tightened. He wanted to speak. He wanted to say the Jedi did not chain animals. He wanted to believe it. Rook stepped closer. "Your movement has spread," he said. "Assassination attempts, sabotage. You will tell me who leads you." The prisoner leaned back as far as the chains allowed. "Leads," the prisoner echoed. "You still think in hierarchies. You still think there's one head you can cut and everything will stop." Rook's jaw tightened. "There is always a head." "Not anymore," the prisoner said softly. "Not since Revan." The name hit Jace like a blow. He had heard stories. Everyone had. Revan as hero. Revan as monster. Revan as the reason half the Order was dead. Rook's hand lifted. The air in the room tightened, pressure building like a storm. Jace felt the force gather, cold and heavy. "Master," Jace said, voice sharper than he intended. "We?" Rook's gaze flicked to him, silencing him without a word. The prisoner's head tilted, as if listening to something beyond the room. "You're doing it," the prisoner murmured. "You're becoming what you hate." Rook's voice dropped. "I am becoming what is necessary." Jace's stomach twisted. Necessary. He had heard that word from soldiers, from senators, from people who killed, and then called it duty. The prisoner laughed again, and the sound was not brave. It was bitter. "You think necessity absolves you," the prisoner said. "It doesn't. It only changes the color of the blood on your hands." Rook's hand clenched. The prisoner's hood jerked as if pulled by invisible fingers. The prisoner gasped, choking. Jace took a step forward without thinking. "Master, stop." Rook did not stop. His face remained calm, but his eyes were hard. "You will learn," he said, to Jace as much as to the prisoner. "That mercy without wisdom is cruelty to the innocent." Jace froze. The words sounded like a lesson. They also sounded like an excuse. The prisoner's hood slipped slightly, revealing a mouth twisted in pain, and a grin. "Do it," the prisoner rasped. "Show your Padawan what the Jedi are now." Rook's grip tightened. Jace felt the force around him tremble, not from power but from conflict. He looked at the half-cleaned symbol scratched on the wall, Revan's mark, smeared and stubborn. Someone had tried to erase it. It remained anyway, like the war itself. "Master," Jace said again, quieter now, voice shaking despite his effort. "Please." For a long moment, Rook held the prisoner suspended between breath and silence. Then he released. The prisoner collapsed forward, coughing, chains rattling. Vrook stepped back as if nothing had happened. "You will speak," Vrook said coldly, "or you will be broken." Jay stared at the prisoner, then at his master. He felt something shift inside him. Something small, dangerous and undeniable. If this was what the war made of Jedi, what would it make of him? Nar Shaddaa's cantinas never slept. They only changed their masks. The back room reeked of smoke and spilled drink, the air thick enough to chew. Neon light bled through cracked panels, turning faces into strange colors, sickly greens, bruised purples, the shades of a world that had forgotten sunlight. A low table sat at the center like an altar, surrounded by armed thugs who watched with the bored menace of men paid to be dangerous. Carth wore a cloak that itched and didn't quite fit right. He hated disguises. He hated pretending. But war made hypocrites of everyone. Across from him sat the crime boss, an older human with rings on every finger and eyes like polished stone. The boss smiled as if this were a social call. "Carth Onasi," the boss said, savoring the name. Or should I say, nobody. Carth's hand tightened around the small credit chip. "Call me what you want," he said. "I'm here for information." The boss leaned back, one hand stroking a pet, some lizard-like creature curled beside the chair. "Information is expensive," the boss said, "especially about new movements. People get protective." "None." Mission leaned against the wall with forced ease, smile bright, voice light. "We're protective too," she said. "That's why we brought credits instead of blasters." HK stood behind them, cloaked in fabric that did nothing to hide the outline of metal limbs. The droid's stillness was unsettling. It watched the room like a predator pretending to be furniture. The boss's gaze flicked to HK, then away quickly, as if refusing to acknowledge something unnatural. "You want to know about the shrine," the boss said. "About the masked preacher." Carth held the boss's gaze. "Yes." The boss tapped one ringed finger against the table. "There are many shrines," he said. "People like stories. People like heroes. They like believing someone smart is in charge." Carth's jaw clenched. "This isn't just stories," he said. "They're moving weapons. They're coordinating attacks." The boss's smile sharpened. "Then maybe they're just doing what the Republic want," he said. "Maybe they're giving the Rim something to believe in." Mission's grin faltered for a heartbeat. "Believe in what?" she asked. "More war." The boss shrugged. "War is honest," he said. "Peace is a lie the rich tell the poor." Carth slid the credit chip across the table. "Names," he said. "Roots. Whoever's supplying them." The boss caught the chip with 2 fingers, weighted as if measuring its worth. "You're buying trouble," he murmured. "But fine. I like trouble when it's paid for." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "They call themselves Revanites," he said. "Not all of them, but enough. They've got hands in shipyards on Coruscant. They've got contacts on Korriban." His eyes gleamed. "And they've got a courier coming tonight. If you want proof, follow the courier." "Nai. Aya." Carth's spine tightened. "Where?" The boss smiled, baring teeth. "Docking Bay 17, he said. "Old section. Quiet." Mission pushed off the wall. "Thanks," she said brightly, as if chatting with a neighbor. Her hand drifted near her hidden weapon anyway. HK's head tilted. "Query," HK said cheerfully. "Is Docking Bay 17 suitable for ambush?" The boss blinked, confused by the droid's tone. Clarification," HK continued. "Ambushes are enjoyable but can be inconvenient if not anticipated." Mission hissed through her teeth. "HK, stop talking." HK's photoreceptors brightened. "Apologetic statement. My enthusiasm for violence sometimes overrides social stealth." Carth stood, cloak shifting. "We're leaving," he said, to Mission, to HK, to himself. As they walked out of the back room, Carth felt eyes on his back. The boss's smile lingered like a knife held near the throat. In the corridor outside, the neon lights flickered, and somewhere deeper in Nar Shaddaa, the shrine's faithful whispered Revan's name. Docking Bay 17 waited in the dark like an open mouth. Sleep did not come easily anymore. Even when Bastila lay in her assigned quarters, even when the temple's halls were quiet, her mind stayed stretched like a wire pulled taut. She felt battles in her dreams. She heard senators arguing in the cadence of nightmares. She saw faces, pilots she'd never met, soldiers she'd never named, turning toward her with desperate expectation. So she returned to meditation, because meditation was the only place she could choose what to face. In a small chamber deep within the temple, she sat alone. Candles burned on low shelves, their flames steady until she closed her eyes and reached. The force answered. It surged around her, and for a moment her body felt weightless, as if the air itself held her. She rose an inch from the floor without thinking, robe hem lifting slightly, hair stirring as if caught in a wind that did not exist. She did not seek battlefields tonight. She sought the edge of the known lanes, the place her senses had brushed in Dantooine Ruins. The pressure beyond, the unseen gaze. Her mind stretched outward, past Coruscant's crowded noise, past the hyperlanes where Republic and Sith hunted each other like wolves circling the same herd. She moved through darkness, guided by instinct and fear. And then she found it. Not a place, exactly. A presence. It was distant, far beyond the Republic's maps, beyond the routes smugglers bragged about. It felt ancient and cold, like stone that had never seen sun. It felt organized, patient, watching. Bastila's breath caught. In the vision that rose behind her eyes, she saw stars, dense clusters, unfamiliar patterns. She saw ships moving in formation, their silhouettes wrong, their design not quite Sith as she knew it, not Republic, something older and more severe. She saw armor that looked like funeral plate. She felt minds behind it, disciplined, silent, utterly certain. A shiver ran through her, and the chamber's candles bent, flames stretching sideways as if pressed by a sudden gust. She reached further, and something reached back. Her vision snapped into sharp focus. A corridor of black stone, lit by pale, sickly light. A figure stood at the end, face hidden, presence vast. It did not speak. It did not need to. Bastila's heart hammered. This was not a warlord on Korriban. This was not a fanatic on Nar Shaddaa. This was something that made those threats feel like children playing with knives. Her mind recoiled instinctively, but as she pulled back, she felt another thread. Familiar, like a scar she'd touched too often. Revan's presence. Not here, not physically, but an echo in the same direction. A path cut into darkness by someone who had gone willingly. Revan had not fled. Revan had gone to meet this. Bastila's eyes flew open. She dropped back to the floor, breath ragged, palms pressed to stone. The candles steadied, but the room still felt wrong, as if the air remembered the pressure. She sat there, trembling, listening to her own heartbeat. The council would not want to hear this. The Senate would not understand it. Carth would believe her, because Carth believed in threats even when others pretended they weren't real. But belief did not solve the problem. Bastila pressed her forehead to her hands, fighting for calm. Somewhere in the temple, a bell chimed softly, marking the hour like a funeral toll. The war was not just refusing to end. It was buying time. The hangar bay smelled of oil and ozone, the scent of machines preparing to do violence. Crew moved in practiced lines, loading munitions, checking seals, shouting orders that were swallowed by the hangar's vast echo. Starfighters waited on their racks like war horses in a stable, their lights blinking in patterns that felt almost like nervousness. Beyond the hangar's force field, space stretched black and patient. Carth stood near the embarkation ramp, his command uniform heavier than it should have been. It wasn't the fabric. It was what it represented. A war that would not let him be anything but a soldier. Bastila approached with measured steps, her robe drawn tight, her face calm in the way of someone who had learned to hide tremors beneath discipline. She looked less like a young Jedi now, and more like a general carved from necessity. "Dodonna's fleet is assembled," Carth said quietly, keeping his voice low despite the noise around them. "We jump within the hour." Bastila nodded. "Korriban," she said. Carth watched her for a heartbeat. He wanted to ask if she was well. He wanted to ask 100 things he didn't have the right to ask. Instead, he said, "You're pale." Bastila's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "I'm alive," she replied. "That seems to be the standard now." Carth exhaled. "We caught one of the assassins," he said. "A name? A movement. Revanites." Bastila's eyes darkened. "I suspected," she said. "There are too many threads weaving in the same direction." Carth hesitated. "There's something else," he said. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Bastila's gaze flicked toward the hangar's open expanse, toward the starfield beyond. "Not a ghost," she murmured. "A shadow." Before Carth could press, a harsh laugh cut through the air. Canderous stood nearby with a cluster of Mandalorian warriors, helmets tucked under their arms. Rain from Onderon still beaded on their armor, proof they'd come straight from negotiation to war without pausing to wash away politics. Canderous grinned at Carth. "Republic sure knows how to throw a party," he said, voice loud enough to carry. "All this metal, all this tension, feels familiar." Carth's expression tightened. "Glad you could join us," he said, and the words were polite only on the surface. Canderous stepped closer, eyes sharp. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "We'll do what we said. We'll fight, we'll take our share, we'll leave when we're done." "And if you're not done?" Carth asked. Canderous's grin widened. "Then the galaxy's got bigger problems than your Senate." Bastila watched them, her expression unreadable. She could feel the Mandalorians like a heat in the Force. Fierce, hungry, proud. Warriors who didn't pretend war was anything but war. A siren chimed, not an alarm, but the call to embark. The fleet was ready. The Republic was moving, not toward peace, but toward another attempt at ending something that did not want to end. Carth stepped onto the ramp, then paused, looking back at Bastila. "Whatever you saw," he said quietly. "Tell me." Bastila's gaze met his. For a moment, the hangar's noise faded around them, as if the Force held them in a pocket of stillness. "I saw the edge of the map," she said, "and something waiting beyond it." Carth's hand tightened on the railing. "Revan?" he asked. Bastila's voice softened. "Revan went there," she said. "And I don't think Revan went alone." Carth swallowed. He thought of the war's shape changing again, widening, deepening. He thought of Korriban's tombs and Nar Shaddaa's shrines and Coruscant's marble corridors where assassins wore servant faces. He nodded once. "Then we finish what we can here," he said. "And we prepare for what comes after." Bastila stepped onto the ramp beside him. Canderous followed, Mandalorians clanking like armored beasts. The ship's engines began to hum with rising power, a vibration that felt like a heartbeat gaining speed. Outside the hangar, stars waited. The fleet would jump soon, vanishing into hyperspace toward Korriban, and whatever traps the Sith had built there. And somewhere, in the darkness beyond the Republic's charts, something watched the lights move, patient, ancient, and pleased that the galaxy was still tearing itself apart.